Good evening, everybody. This is Matt Wilson with B2B Security. We have Ron Schlecht and Leo Serrano. Thank you for joining us.
Hey.
From Philly Secure Shell. Leo, you built a pretty interesting and pretty large, I think we can say, community here in the Philadelphia area. I think if you're in information security in the Philadelphia area, you've probably heard of Philly Secure Shell, but you know, when Ron and I have been talking over the last couple of weeks about, we hope so. If you're paying attention at all, it's kind of hard to miss. But Ron and I were looking to, just get interesting folks that we have connections with onto the series of figuring it out. And I think a lot of people probably are interested not just in how Philly Secure Shell came together, but even that concept of, grassroots community building. That's something, you took on 5 some years ago. So maybe you back us up, why information security, why a community in Philly?
Yeah. So, I made the terrible mistake of becoming an accounting major in undergrad. And I've been paying for it ever since. And so,
you do your own taxes. So yay. Right?
Yeah. No, it's good. It has worked out, but Shell was like, I've been paying back my dues for that mistake for a while, and Shell was kind of like the last Hail Mary, right? I just finished an undergrad. I'd finished a master's in IT audit and cybersecurity, right? Heavy on the audit, low on the cybersecurity, and I really wanted to start talking to people. I'm the type of person that can learn from a book. You absolutely have to be if you're going to be in information security. But
sure.
I also just learn so much better from like talking to people. And there's like that tribal knowledge, right? There's that little bit of unwritten flavor to InfoSec that you just couldn't get from books. And I was desperate to talk to people. And so I found the community that already existed in Philadelphia, because there was like a pretty rich community already. If you're not familiar with PhillySec and PumpCon, PhillySec has been running for decades. PumpCon is like one of the oldest cons in the United States. The story goes that it's actually 1 year older than DEF CON. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but if you ask anyone at a PumpCon, they'll say it definitely is.
Yeah.
So there was a community here, but after like spending time in the community and like learning from those guys, I was like, all right, well, this is great. But what I really want is to get a few people sober and talking about like, and actually like trying to teach a little bit, right?
Sure.
Not that I haven't learned a lot of interesting things from intoxicated red teamers.
Maybe some things that you didn't want to learn, probably, but
maybe things you probably shouldn't have learned.
Useful things are useful things, right? And I never turned down knowledge. So, and that was kind of like the philosophy that I had going into Shell, right? Is like I never turned down knowledge, and I want to see what other people know. And I knew that I couldn't be the only noob, right? I knew for sure that I was definitely the least shy person I knew, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, let's get a meetup together. Let's see what we can, who we can gather, right? And I still didn't really have a mission statement or a plan or anything. I just really wanted to see like, who else is in Philadelphia, right? Like maybe there's people who are more academically inclined. Maybe there's people who are who can't make it to these events. Maybe there's people who don't think that they should make it to these events because they're afraid of the big bad hackers, right? And they want to learn about InfoSec. So I started Shell, and people started showing up, and it sort of started growing from there. And it kind of...
How'd you get the first message out? Was it just like an email blast? I mean, Twitter existed, but like, how do you get followers when people don't know who you are?
Yeah, I mean, it was all organic, right? So like for the first couple of months, I really thought it was just going to be like it wasn't even going to be a flash in the pan, right? I thought it was going to be a dud, but I was willing to like spend the money and the time to just try and see what happened. So it's funny because I've talked to the person who started the Harrisburg security meetup, and he actually did a really smart thing, which is he put out an ad. And
right.
And I didn't think of that. I mean, like I just kind of was like, well, I wonder who's even looking at this stuff. So I got a meetup, and I got a Twitter. And really, like my original plan was, thinking back on it, is I wanted a physical location so that all these people who were gathering could have a place to gather too, right? Because
Sure.
if you've ever planned something in the city, like it's a nightmare getting a bar to agree to the stuff, like and especially when you're just starting out, right? So for the first couple of years, we actually were just kind of like meeting whenever anyone would take us.
Right.
So North Third was like one of the first meetup spots. I think I don't recall what it's called now, but it was like a development space on Third Street.
I'm trying to remember because I think that's where I started. Like when I first came down, that's where I was, but I can't remember what it was now or what it is now.
Yeah, I think it's like Jarvis now.
Yeah.
If you guys have notes or something, I can like send it to you. But that's where we started, and basically what they were doing is like they were open to like non-for-profits, and Shell at the time wasn't even a non-for-profit. It was just kind of an idea, and a Twitter account and an email address. So we just started meeting there, like not really knowing what we were doing. And we the early days were really cool because we didn't have a format yet, so no one had expectations. So people would just bring like the coolest stuff, right? I think one of the first ones was
Saw this on Reddit. Let's talk.
Yeah,
right.
but like in like not a shady way. Well, so it's hilarious because like one of the early ones is Radio Shack was closing, and a good friend of mine, he bought their POS system, and he was just like, "Hey man, like you cool with me bringing this down to Shell?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely, bring it down." He's like, "Yeah, we could just like practice like whaling on a POS system. It's like it, how else are you gonna do that?" And I'm like, "Yes, this is exactly what I wanted. Bring the POS system, like bring whatever else you got. Bring your wireless cards. Let's see what kind of trouble we can get into with stuff that like no one can say, hey, don't hack that, right?
Yeah. Just strolling with a voting machine. That'd be fantastic. Right?
I mean, hey, if anybody wants to bring a voting machine to a Shell event, I'll get a Shell event going. We'll social distance it, right?
Right.
I mean, if you're in the machine, you're 6 feet away with a wall, right? So.
Yeah.
One of the things, Leo, that I really liked, and this goes back years. I mean, we've known each other for a good number of years now and kind of kept in touch.
Yep.
Is that when I came to the first meetup, and it was kind of like, we'll come down and we'll chat, and maybe we can do something a little bit bigger, or we can sponsor it, or maybe buy some pizza or whatever, just basically give some food for the event, and just kind of talk through some of that stuff. What I thought was really neat was that unlike a lot of security get-togethers or meetups, it was really just a little bit of everyone. So it was probably a lot more welcoming initially than a lot of most meetups tend to be. I mean, you go to even like some of the DEF CON groups, it's a little bit intimidating because you walk into it thinking that, you're dealing with people who are so steeped in security, and not until you're in it a little bit more do you realize that people are all kind of there for the same reason, which is to share knowledge. But I think, the one thing that struck me about Philly Secure Shell was that it was people trying to get into cybersecurity. It was people that were in cybersecurity, but then just the vast amount of knowledge and the kind of sharing, even with people that were in the industry, because it's so diverse. I liked it because it wasn't just like, 20 people going like, all right, well, what can you do? And how can you help me get a job? It was like, listen, I'm a web developer right now, or I'm doing IT audit and it sucks and I want to get out of it, or I want to get into something more specifically, like what's the best thing to look at, or just, hey, here's a cool thing. Like you said, the POS system. Hey, here's a cool thing. Let's tinker around with it. Maybe ask some questions and get different viewpoints on what we could do or how we could do it. So it was like, it was very laid back, but the amount of connections where people just strike up a conversation and then you kind of take that on, it was cool to me because those are the ones that just kind of continued. And people, but I still, every once in a while, people will say like, oh yeah, I met you at Philly Secure Show. I was like, oh, that's right. Like, I remember having this conversation or whatever. Yeah. So I think just the actual community, and maybe it's a city thing, right? Maybe it's a Philadelphia thing. I don't know, but it was probably one of the most welcoming groups that I've ever kind of gone into and had like really easy conversations with folks.
Yeah, I mean, so I hope that like it was some positive influence on my part that did that, right? So like I never pretend to be like the smartest person in the room, and if like you are the smartest person in the room, but you have a shitty attitude, I don't know that like I'll be listening to you for very long.
Exactly.
So
And if you're the smartest person in the room, who are you learning from? Right. That's the other thing.
Right. Yeah.
So I never want to be the smartest guy in the room, in that kind of room, right? And usually I'm not by a long shot. So
but yeah, it's like that was the beautiful thing of the early days before we got like really structured, is like it really was just about like hey, who knows something cool they want to share, right? And I think that's kind of like that was like the core of it, right? Is like I think I was saying earlier, it's you could have a developer who's like curious about this InfoSec thing, but he's not quite ready, or they're not quite ready to go to like a red team village or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, they can just show up to a shell meeting, right? Like, I mean, we've had PhDs in comp sci talk about Mimikatz when Mimikatz was like first coming out, right? And like talk about running exploits in memory so that it never touches the hardware. And Ron, I don't know if you were there for that one, but I think everyone in the room, from like the lowliest noob to the most advanced individual, sat perfectly still for 2 hours and just kept telling this guy, no, go on.
Yeah.
Right. And so like it cracks me up because sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, I heard that was like a noob thing. I'm like, well no, like we're cool with noobs.
Yeah.
But like if you catch us on a day where like we're like talking about like cyber insurance, it's like, I'm sorry, but like I want to know about cyber insurance. I want to understand like what my CEO is concerned about, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't want to work in that field, but I want to know. And it's the same thing with like with like esoteric attacks or like flipping bits and stuff like that. Like I want to know. And everyone in that room just wanted the knowledge. They didn't care. It was like, there's no pretense. There was no claim to be elite.
Yeah. It was not like, I don't think, and maybe it's something with security overall. If you get the right group of people, there's no real prejudice when it comes to the amount of knowledge that you have, or even what your title is. You know what I mean? Because some people have titles that don't necessarily match what their skill set is. And a lot of times people prejudge those folks when they start a conversation. They're like, oh, you're just it's like, you're a whatever, like lower level thing. It was like, well, obviously you don't have tons of experience. I'm like, that's not necessarily true. Like you may have somebody that's way ahead of what their title says skill set wise, but they're just getting started and they don't have the experience to be able to get into a role where they're able to demonstrate that larger experience. And I think it happens a lot with people that are coming from like development roles or networking roles, or really any role where they have a little bit of a different background. But then once they get into security, they really start to blossom because of that different perspective that they bring to the table. So I thought that was cool. It was kind of like nobody really gave a shit like what your title was or like what you said your experience was. It was just kind of like, well, cool, let's just have a conversation, which is, to me, that's like the best.
Yeah.
Show them what you know, right? Like you either know it and you're talking about it and you demonstrate capability, titles be damned.
Yeah.
So the founder of B-Sides Philadelphia did something pretty hilarious. The first time he ever spoke, or probably the only time he ever spoke at a shell meeting, is he walked in and he saw the crowd and he's like, hey man, I don't have a talk prepared, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to the crowd and we're going to see where this goes.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey man, like do it. Like that actually sounds awesome. Right. And he did it. He did it for like an hour. He was just like standing up like on the little stage that like that venue on Third had, just asking questions. It's like, what do you guys think? Like, where do you think this is going in 20 years? Like from your expertise, like what are you concerned about? Right. And we had lawyers in the audience. We had people who wanted to get involved. We had who just wanted to get involved with the community who didn't know anything yet. We had people who'd been in the community for 20 years or had been developers, and then like people like who were around when hacking started, and then we're just kind of like, nah, I'm just gonna keep working like my day job, but I'll still do this on the side.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was just like a great conversation, and all the only nothing was provided by the speaker, right, and everything was provided by the people in the audience, and that's kind of what Shell has always been to me is stone soup, because the only thing I provide is the pot and like a reason to for people to get together. That sounds kind of bad. Edit that.
That's a good way to say it, I think. So one of the things that I know everyone's gonna ask is what's next? Like, is there any, maybe not what's next, or like how has the pandemic changed anything, and what do you see as the next sort of level for Philly Secure Shell, or what do you see it becoming in the future?
Yeah, so the pandemic kind of like the main Shell management was sort of drifting away from each other for a while before the pandemic. So just to give credit where credit is due. So Chris Rossi came aboard like a couple months after we started. So he was basically with Shell from since day one. And then Charles Grillo came on board after that. And he like did a couple talks. He put together some recordings, helped develop trainings, and Kai Feister came on a little bit after that. And, you know, he did the same thing. He provided talks, trainings. They really like provided sort of a roster of like available resources that we could revisit, right? But as we all got busier with like life and stuff, we started drifting apart. Like, you know, meeting in person kind of started to become like a bigger hassle, things like that. So like that's where we were headed before the pandemic. And so I was like, you know, trying to figure out like, what does this mean, right? Like I personally don't think that people need Shell, but I think it's a good thing to have a community, especially because we built Shell to like a 1,400 person community, right? Like what do they need? And you know, we were asking those questions when the pandemic hit. And so, you know, I set up a Twitch stream sometime after. I got a couple episodes out. But really, like, there's world-class content out there every day now, right? Yeah. I mean, you're doing your thing, right? Yeah. Matt, you and Matt are doing your thing. You know, I don't need to like gather to how do I put this? People don't need me or anyone really to gather content for them, or not like a single piece of content, right? Like you don't need someone to figure out what you're going to do Thursday night, right? Yeah. But maybe what you need is a group of friends who tell you, hey man, like that new BTB content, that's the stuff you got to check out. Yeah. Right. And so like that's what I think the future of Shell is, right? And I've sort of kicked it around with other people at conferences and things like that. Is, you know, how do you know that a training is good, right? How do you know that like $1,000 training is worth it? How do you know that like it's worth spending the time to listen to that talk, right? And how do you know that the person telling you that it's good isn't on somebody's, isn't taking money from somebody or something like that, right? Yeah. Not that anybody would, but like.
No, they do.
Well, that was one of the things, I don't want to take us off topic, but that's one of the things I was impressed with just a little bit of an aside. You know, look, as a vendor, BTB is a vendor, right? We think that we go about it in a lot of good ways, but like you get that vendor influence in everything, right? They want to sponsor, they just want to give you the marketing stuff. They don't want to give you, like you said, like the good stuff. Most vendors just want to have the prepared slides that marketing went through and polished up. And like the folks that really have a knowledge and understanding are going to see right through that, and they're going to be over it in about 10 seconds. Right? Yeah. So that's not going to keep them coming back. You can't let that infect what you're doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, Ron, I don't know if I ever said this to you, but I think I probably said it to like every vendor that's ever come through Security Shell is like, it'll usually start with me going like, hey, I'm not really interested in buying your product, but if you ever have an engineer in Philadelphia on the third Thursday of the month, and he's willing to talk about your technology and like the issues that your clients are facing, and like why you're actually good, not your pitch, but like the technology at your core, or like the thing that makes you different. That engineer will have like 2 CISOs, a bunch of lawyers, like architects, engineers, and some college students all listening, right? And like, and it worked. Like they would send me engineers and they wouldn't send me salespeople, and it was beautiful.
I think that's the way to do it. I mean, find people that are passionate about it and just continue to get their engagement with it, and it'll beget more people, you know, being involved with it and wanting to kind of share their experience, and then, you know, help the community as well.
Yeah. And I mean, and like we've had some really cool talks. We had I'm blanking on his name, but he was one of the directors. He was like a very high up individual in the CIA, and like was involved with Prism. And like he just like called us up out of the blue, and he was like, "Hey, would you guys want to hear me speak?" And it was like, yes, like this is when we meet, but if you want us to change our time, like we could do that. And then like he just came in, he did his thing, he talked about like the projects he'd done, the things he'd seen, a lot of like off the record stuff, and then he just left. And like, you know, I email him, I get emails from him from time to time.
Yeah.
And I'm blanking on his name. I hate the fact that I'm blanking on his name, but like,
it was so good you can't
I hate
remember.
the fact that I wasn't at that one. I really wish I was. That would be cool.
Well, yeah.
Leo, appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you sharing what the community and kind of the why behind it. How can people get a hold of you or check out Philly Secure Shell?
Yeah, so our Twitter and Meetup are the best way to do it. So if you go on Meetup and look for Sec Shell or Philly Security Shell, you'll be able to find us. If Meetup is being too difficult because sometimes they don't index us, I don't know what it is. I think it might be like the area. You can go to Twitter, sec_shell, at sec_shell. That's our main Twitter. I've also got like another project going that I think is good, or like I'm very passionate about, which is Trash Panda Sec, which is just, yes, I am Trash Panda Sec.
I love it. I saw it when, yeah.
Right. So I apologize for what you may see, but it's a little bit of a continuation of Shell, which is, so I've always wanted to make sure that Shell had the resources it needed to stand alone, and maybe like, again, pay for that hackerspace, pay for that pizza, you know, like not really have to like worry about it, and give people a sense of belonging and community, right? And what says belonging and community more than stickers? So now I make stickers. Yeah. So now I make stickers.
When you were a young child, did you ever think making stickers was going to be? But we also didn't think being a professional YouTuber would be a thing either. But
no doubt.
But right. Leo, again, I wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time out. We'll have to get together again. Hopefully, in real life, one of these days, we'll all be able to get together. But thank you for everything you've done in the Philadelphia area, and looking forward to the next meeting we can be at. Yeah, man, it's been a blast. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Leo.
Take care.